Silence has a power that words will never be able to match. When you stop explaining yourself, stop arguing, stop chasing, and simply go quiet, you create an impact that no long speech ever could. The person on the other side might expect you to plead, to defend, or to keep reaching out in hopes of making things right. But when instead they are met with nothing but your silence, it unsettles them in a way they never anticipated. It speaks volumes, not through noise, but through absence. Silence shows strength. It shows control. It shows that you are not willing to spend your energy convincing someone of your value. You already know your worth, and you refuse to waste time proving it to someone who chose not to see it. At first, they may misinterpret your silence as indifference. They may convince themselves you've moved on too easily, that you no longer care. But that belief doesn't last long, because silence echoes louder with each passing day. With no words to fight against, no messages to ignore, and no contact to push away, they're left alone with their own thoughts. And that is where the battle begins. Not with you, but within them. They start asking themselves why you're no longer talking, why you stopped trying, and why the energy they once expected from you has disappeared. The lack of your voice becomes louder than anything you could have said. The most powerful thing about silence is that it cannot be argued with. If you send words, they can dismiss them. If you call, they can reject the call. If you try to explain yourself, they can twist your meaning or downplay your feelings. But when you stay quiet, there's nothing for them to fight against. There's no distraction from the truth that lingers in their mind. They're forced to face their own behavior because there's nothing else left to focus on. Silence doesn't just speak, it mirrors their actions back at them. It makes them realize the space that used to be filled by your presence is now just emptiness. Silence also commands respect in a way chasing never will. When you stay silent, you take back your power. You stop giving them the satisfaction of controlling your emotions. Instead of reacting, you withdraw. Instead of begging, you detach. That shift forces them to see you differently. You are no longer the person who will always be there no matter what they do. You've drawn an invisible boundary that says, if you cannot appreciate me, and that boundary is what makes them think, reflect, and eventually regret. In the end, silence isn't just about ignoring someone. It's about protecting yourself, reclaiming your dignity, and letting the absence of your words do the work for you. And often that quiet truth pierces deeper than anything you could ever say out loud. When you decide to go silent, one of the first realizations that begins to set in for the other person is the loss of your energy. People don't always recognize how much space you fill in their lives until you pull it back. Your calls, your texts, your check-ins, your effort to keep things alive, those were all forms of energy that they grew comfortable with, maybe even entitled to. They may not have thanked you for it or even noticed how consistent you were, but the moment it disappears, the void becomes undeniable. Suddenly their phone is quieter, their days are emptier, and the easy assurance that you'll always be there is gone. That shift is jarring, and it forces them to feel the weight of your absence in a way that words never could. Silence removes comfort. When you're constantly giving attention, you make it easy for someone to take you for granted. They don't have to work for your presence because you're already there, pouring into them without hesitation. But when you stop, when the flow of energy cuts off, they no longer have that cushion. They begin to realize that what felt normal wasn't guaranteed. It was a privilege. And human nature is such that people only truly value privileges when they're taken away. The silence you create becomes a mirror reflecting just how much you contributed to their sense of stability, validation, and connection. The interesting thing is that at first, they may not admit it. They might act unaffected, pretending that your absence doesn't bother them. They might even try to convince themselves they're fine. But deep down, the void you've left becomes heavier with time. days turn into weeks and the silence doesn't break, that's when regret starts to creep in. They remember the small ways you showed up, the words you used to say, the comfort of knowing someone cared. They realize they underestimated your value because they assumed you'd never stop giving it. Silence makes them face that harsh truth in a way nothing else could. What silence also does is shift the balance of power. Before, they had control. They knew they could push you away, ignore you, or even dismiss your efforts, and still you would come back. But when you go silent, that control vanishes. You're no longer predictable. They can't rely on your presence because you've proven that you won't force yourself where you're not respected. That unpredictability is powerful because it puts the focus back on them. It makes them wonder, did I lose something important? Did I misjudge this person's worth? Am I really okay without them? Those questions don't fade quickly. They linger and they grow louder. With every day your silence continues. So understand this, silence isn't just the absence of words, it's the presence of self-respect. It's a way of showing that you value your energy too much to waste it on someone who won't reciprocate. And eventually that silence becomes the loudest reminder of what they lost. One of the most powerful aspects of silence is that it gives someone the space to sit with themselves. And in that space, they are confronted with their own behavior. When you remove yourself from the constant cycle of communication and effort, they're left to face the echoes of their choices. Every time they reach for their phone to check if you've messaged and find nothing, the reality of what they did to push you away sinks in a little deeper. Silence forces reflection in a way that words cannot. If you had tried to explain, reason, or argue, they might have dismissed your feelings or deflected the blame. But silence, it doesn't argue, it just lets the truth settle on its own, and that truth can feel unbearable. Regret thrives in quiet moments. In the absence of your presence, they begin replaying the things they said or didn't say, the times they ignored you, the chances they had to appreciate you but didn't. Memory has a way of amplifying what we've lost once it's gone. What they brushed off in the moment now comes back as haunting reminders of missed opportunities. The small moments where you gave your time, effort, and attention suddenly seem bigger because they can't access them anymore. Silence makes every detail sharper because it highlights what's no longer available. Reflection also shifts their perception of you. While you were present, they might have taken you as a given, assuming your efforts were endless. But once you step back and stay quiet, you begin to stand out as someone who values themselves, someone who refuses to beg for attention or chase after crumbs. And paradoxically, this is when they start to see your true worth. Human nature often fails to value what's abundant, but scarcity, your silence, forces them to recognize what they overlooked. It's in the gap of your absence that they begin to realize just how rare your presence actually was. The silence also creates a kind of accountability. Without your words, they can't argue, can't twist, can't avoid the reality. They are left alone with their conscience, and that is often harsher than anything you could have said. They're forced to admit to themselves that they let someone valuable slip away. And the regret that grows from that admission lingers longer than any lecture ever would. In many ways, silence is not just a withdrawal of communication, it's a lesson. It teaches them through experience that neglect and disregard have consequences, and those consequences are often irreversible. This is why silence is such a powerful form of response. It doesn't just protect your peace, it also magnifies your value in the eyes of the one who lost it. By saying nothing, you've said everything. And over time, that truth is impossible for them to ignore. When silence stretches on, something shifts deep inside the person who once thought they could take you for granted. At first, they may feel relief, maybe even a false sense of control, believing that your absence means they've somehow won. But as the days turn into weeks and the reality of your distance solidifies, that false confidence begins to crumble. Silence has a way of stripping away illusions. It reminds them that no matter how much they try to convince themselves they didn't need you, your absence leaves a void they can't fill. That quietness doesn't just feel like space, it feels like loss. And loss, when it becomes undeniable, turns into regret. This regret grows because silence is permanent in its tone. Words can be debated, apologies can be argued, and conversations can be revisited, but silence doesn't offer those chances. It doesn't provide reassurances or hints of possibility. Instead, it sends one clear message. You've moved on with your dignity intact, and there's no need to circle back. That message cuts deeper than any confrontation ever could. It reminds them that some doors, once closed, don't open again, and that knowledge forces them to reckon with the fact that their actions had permanent consequences. The power of silence also lies in how it shifts the dynamic of control. While they may have once felt you were dependent on them for attention, communication, or validation, your silence proves the opposite. It shows strength, discipline, and a level of self-respect that they can't ignore. And the longer you remain silent, the more undeniable that strength becomes. In their regret, they begin to see that they didn't just lose someone who cared, they lost someone who knew their worth. That realization stings because it means the problem wasn't you. It was their inability to appreciate you when they had the chance. In many ways, silence is its own kind of mirror. It reflects back to them the reality of how they treated you without you needing to say a single word. Every unanswered call, every unopened message, every moment of quiet reinforces the truth that their actions led to this outcome. And the more they're forced to sit with that, the heavier the regret becomes. It's not just about missing you. It's about realizing they had something meaningful and failed to cherish it. That regret doesn't just fade, it lingers, resurfacing in unexpected moments, reminding them of the person they let slip away. This is why silence is so powerful. It not only protects your peace, but also delivers the most profound lesson. It teaches them that choices matter. And once the silence becomes permanent, there's no going back. As silence stretches longer, what begins as confusion or mild discomfort in their mind transforms into an undeniable recognition of your value. At first, they might distract themselves, filling the space with noise, other people, or temporary escapes. But no distraction lasts forever. Eventually, they find themselves replaying old conversations, remembering the times you showed care, the moments you stood by them, and the comfort of knowing you were there. That's the irony. Silence doesn't erase your presence, it amplifies it. And instead of forgetting you, they feel you more intensely because they now compare every quiet moment with the times when your voice, your attention, and your energy were part of their daily life. And this recognition cuts deep because it makes them realize that what they dismissed, overlooked, or even rejected was something rare. They start to see that your patience, your understanding, your effort were not guaranteed, but were gifts. And when those gifts are withdrawn, the emptiness makes them appreciate what they had. That is the power of silence. It doesn't just create absence, it forces awareness. They start to notice the difference between what life felt like with you in it and what life feels like now that you're gone. That gap is where regret begins to take root. The longer you remain silent, the more undeniable this recognition becomes. They can't tell themselves stories forever. They can't pretend that what you gave was ordinary because they quickly realize not everyone will care for them the way you did. Not everyone will understand them, stand by them, or invest in them the way you once did. Silence sharpens that truth. It magnifies the unique qualities you brought into their life and makes them see how foolish it was to take it for granted. And here's the most powerful part. Silence communicates without needing to speak. You don't have to explain your worth anymore. You don't have to argue, prove, or remind them of what you brought to the table. By choosing silence, you let the absence speak for itself, and it speaks louder than any words ever could. They realize on their own that losing you wasn't just losing a person, it was losing the steady presence, the love, the loyalty, and the energy that made their life better. That realization doesn't just sting, it lingers. Because once someone truly recognizes your value, they can never unsee it. This is why silence is so powerful. It doesn't just protect your dignity, it forces others to wake up to the truth of who you are and what they lost. And the longer the silence holds, the stronger that recognition becomes. Silence is not just about what the other person feels, it's about what it creates in you. When you step away from noise, drama, and constant explanations, you enter a space where you can hear yourself again. At first, the silence may feel heavy, almost uncomfortable, because you are used to pouring energy into someone else, seeking answers, or waiting for validation. But with time, that silence transforms into clarity. You begin to see things for what they are, not for what you hope they could be. You start to notice your own patterns, your own strength, and your own worth without relying on anyone else to define it for you. This internal transformation is where the true power lies. While they may be sitting in regret, replaying what they lost, you are rising into a stronger, more confident version of yourself. Silence becomes the soil in which your self-respect grows. It allows you to focus on your goals, your peace, and your vision for the future instead of staying stuck in cycles of confusion or pain. The longer you remain silent, the more you shift the energy back toward yourself, and that shift not only heals you, but makes you unshakable. So it's in this process that you stop needing closure from others. You stop waiting for apologies, explanations, or validation. Instead, you give yourself closure by choosing peace over chaos. Silence is your boundary. It's your declaration that your energy is too valuable to waste on people who don't appreciate it. And as you grow in this state, you naturally elevate your standards. You become more selective about who gets access to you because you finally see that not everyone deserves the gift of your presence. And here's the beauty of it. When you embrace silence fully, you don't just win the silent battle with them, you win the greater battle within yourself. You no longer seek power in their reaction, but in your own transformation. The longer you hold the line, the more they feel the weight of regret, but the more you feel the freedom of self-mastery. This is the point where the tables truly turn, not because you were trying to make them regret, but because you were focused on becoming better for yourself. That's when your silence stops being about them and becomes about you, and that's when it reaches its fullest strength. So the longer you stay silent, the more it works in your favor. It heals you, it transforms you, and it forces others to face the truth of what they lost. And in the end, that's how silence wins, not just by making them regret, but by helping you rise.